Hello everyone, and welcome to another cartography lecture video. And in this lecture video, I want to continue our discussion on data and classification by talking about classification itself. So up to this point, we've spent a lot of time talking about data from a theoretical standpoint in terms of what different types of data we can have, as well as how we can visualize and describe data with tables and statistics. So what I want to do is I want to take all of those concepts and I want to build them into this idea of classification. So classification, at least the way that we're going to be talking about it, is only going to be for interval and ratio data. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about broadly what classification is, and then we're going to dig into this first method called equal interval. So let's go ahead and give ourselves some room here, and let's talk about what classification is. Right, so we're talking about classification. And so broadly speaking, the goal of classification is to take a data set and break it up into meaningful groups that we can then use from a cartographic perspective to be able to tell a story. And so sort of to put that into words, right, classification is the goal of breaking data down into meaningful groups. So this is different from, say, classification in terms of regression or prediction, where we're trying to classify data into, for the sake of prediction. In terms of this context within cartography, classification is just breaking data down into meaningful groups. And so I want to sort of diagram out conceptually what this looks like in much the same way that we did with interquartile range. Right, I want you to imagine we have a data set. Right, I'm not going to bother drawing a distribution here because it really doesn't matter. The concept is going to be the same. On one end, we have the minimum of the data set. On the other end, we have the maximum of the data set. Right, this is just like we drew with interquartile range, so our data is going to be distributed somehow, somewhere along this line. Right, the idea of classification is to set up what are called breakpoints. So we could have 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, these red things are called breakpoints. So in this case, we have 4 breakpoints. Right, and these breakpoints break the data up into groups, or sometimes you'll see these groups called classes, which is where classification comes from. Right, and so in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classes. Right, we have 4 breakpoints, 5 classes. And so anything between the minimum and this first breakpoint here, right, this is going to be class 1. Between the first breakpoint and the second breakpoint, right, this is going to be class 2, class 3, right, class 4. And then anything between the final breakpoint and the maximum, right, is going to be class 5. Right, so this idea of placing breakpoints along the data to separate them into classes, this is the general idea of classification. And what we're going to be talking about in this video and the next couple of videos is going to be classification schemes, which are methods that we can use to figure out where we want to actually place these different breakpoints. So let's go ahead and jump into the first method, which is going to be equal interval. Right, equal interval. So equal interval is probably the easiest and most straightforward classification method because all we're doing is we're breaking data up so that each class has the same range. Right, it breaks data into classes of equal range based on the number of classes. So let's take a quick thought here of what this would look like. So if we're breaking it into classes of equal range based on the number of classes, what that means is that these the distance between these breakpoints is going to be the same, right? Because the range between the breakpoints is going to be the same, or the interval between the breakpoints is going to be the same. Hence, equal interval. So what does that look like conceptually? Well, what that means is that we take the total range, or the range of the data set, right? The range of the data set, and then we divide that by the number of classes that we want, right? Divided by the number of classes that we want. Right, and that gives us the range for each class. So let's quickly hop back into our Excel here. I'm going to copy our data and I'm going to keep it sorted just because that makes things much easier on us. I'm going to remove the colors. No fill. Okay. So first thing we need to do is we need to calculate the range, which is just the maximum minus the minimum. So the range of this data set is 2.5 feet. And then what we want to do here is we want to figure out, well, how many classes do we want? I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm going to assume that we want 3 classes. So classes 3. And so what I want to do is I want to divide the range by the number of classes. So that means that each class is going to have 0.84 feet in it. So in order to assign classes, we start at the minimum. And so we do the first class. So we'll say class 1 is going to be 4.3, so that's the minimum. 2, and then equals 4.3 plus 0.83 to 5.13. Class 2 is going to be 5.13 to, and then if we add 0.83 to that, to 5.96. And then if we add class 3 is going to be 5.96 to, and then just add our 0.833 to that. Oops. Plus. There we go. And that's going to be our 6.8. Right, so if we divide this up, everything between 4.3 and 5.13, this is going to be class 1. So I'll make class 1 this sort of orange color. From 5.13 to 5.96, that's going to be these two, are going to be in class 2, which we will make this pale blue color. And then from 5.96 to 6.8, which is going to be all of those, is going to be our third class, which will make this green color. Right? Class 1, class 2, and class 3. Okay. So this is going to be our equal interval, and we're going to compare. Actually, I'll drag these down here so that we can keep them for later. Because eventually what I want to do is I want to compare how these change based on the choice of classification scheme. So again, just to recap, with equal interval, we take the range of the data set divided by the number of classes, That gives us the range for each class, and then we just simply go through and we add the range to generate our class breaks, and then we assign the values accordingly. So hopefully this made sense, and if you have any questions, as always, please reach out. Thank you.